Guys, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. Today I have the awesome man, Brian Baugh, one of the most interesting people we have so far. He's a director, writer, director, producer, got an awesome room so far. And in case you don't see, those are movies that he's been a part of in the background. And Brian, thank you so much for being here, man. I know we connected through our mutual friend Danielle, who's also a coach. And just for everyone, how many kids do you have? What are the names?
I've got two kids. I have a ninth grader, Noel, and a sixth grader, Daniel. So a girl and a boy.
Nice, man. And what would you say is your happiest memory so far being a dad?
Wow. That is a good question. To me, it's all the little moments, the ones you don't expect, but I really get a kick out of it when you're on the journey and you're seeing them discover something that they love. So that's happened a number of different times, but just getting to see them get really engaged in something, and it could be really random or really, it doesn't have to be anything grand, but just to see them come alive, to learn something new, to see a new facet of this amazing world that lights their fire. I think that's really fun for me to see.
Is there, because they're pretty, they're still young, so they're still learning new things. Is there anything in particular that comes to mind?
I guess, my daughter, when she was young, she would like raid the recycle bin and like create these like just with tape and glue and she would create these almost like a ski lift type thing, for her stuffed animals, and make these little baskets and move them all around and just to see what she could come up with and create out of junk was
Super creative.
is awesome. And then I think with my son, like, he got really into the Rubik's Cube randomly. I can't even remember how it started.
Yeah.
And so he can now solve it in under 20 seconds. And
Oh, wow.
all different kinds. And I would have never thought in a million years back, when I was a kid, giving up on the Rubik's Cube, that I would have a kid that he would be into it, So it's silly, different, unique things, but just to see them enjoy that.
Yeah, dude, that's just a cool party trick.
Yeah, exactly. Like, dude, you got to do the school talent show.
Yeah, he's like Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness. Before you know, he's gonna get a job that way.
That's right.
Yeah, dude, that's so awesome, man. And well, hey, one question I have is, what would you say is your proudest moment so far as a dad? We spoke about the happiest, but I'm curious, you as a father, like, what are you most proud of how you've shown up throughout the time that they've been, in your life?
I guess for for me personally, when I'm proud of myself or proud of them?
I would say both.
Okay. I'm kind of a pretty intense person, so I tend to like the more intense things, but seeing them, was super proud of, like, for example, my daughter, like, when she actually stood up to this teacher at one point in time because she felt like the teacher was being harsh to this student. It was in like third or fourth, maybe third grade or something. But I love the fact that she like stood up to the administration and like essentially went and told on her teacher. But I love the fact that she was looking out for, I was just proud of her for looking out for those that were hurting and those that were feeling mistreated or oppressed at the moment. And so that was a problem. Yeah, but pretty much anytime they do something really difficult, I don't care if they fail or succeed, but I'm always proud of them when they try hard things, because that's a skill we all need to learn and develop, and it doesn't we're going to have to do difficult things eventually. You may as well learn how to as young as possible, and figure that out. So yeah, so I'm proud of them for that. When they do stuff that they wouldn't ordinarily, that's out of their comfort zone, that they wouldn't normally be drawn to, and they engage in it anyway because they find some purpose in it or some deeper meaning.
Yeah, I know. It's I've been doing more, more studying myself, and like one of the what is it called? One of the ineffective parenting styles is, the helicopter parent. And we saw that, like, there's a lot of teasing about it, but there's truth to everything, is with like like millennials, and they
Right.
grew up kind of like the participation trophy kind of thing. And that's where it's like, yeah, like that's helicopter parenting has existed for years, but for some reason it just got amplified during that time. And it's like, I don't want my kid to do anything difficult because I want to protect them. And
Right.
it just sets a lot of people up for like, oh man, like life is not this way.
Yeah. It's not accurate training for the world. It just trains people to be inept, really.
Yeah. And there's like with all things, it comes from a place of love, but like just because it doesn't mean it is the most effective. So
right.
I'm curious, what would you say is, maybe not the proudest moment that you've had as an experience as a father so far?
I think probably those moments when I'm feeling rushed or hurried or have other things that feel urgent, where perhaps you'd miss out on a moment, or perhaps a cool time of putting your kid to bed, or because it's a quantity plus quality sort of thing, like the quantity leads to the quality. And so you can't always schedule when these intimate, unique conversations are going to happen. And so I think when I'm feeling rushed and I don't put in the time, or perhaps do things to shut down those conversations, like talk too much or or not listen well because I'm hurried and wanting to move through it. So yeah, so I would say that.
And I'm curious because there's such a I'm curious about your experience, with like creating all these movies. Like you're in the film industry, there's an enormous amount of like work involved, at least from the little that I know. And like my assumption is, and please let me know if this is just an assumption, just just inaccurate. Like, I'm curious, how do you travel a lot for the work that you do?
Yeah, I tend to. It was more so like 10 years ago. But yeah, but there can be long chunks of travel, like 3 months being gone. Weeks apart. Yeah, there is a decent amount of travel involved, but it tends to be in big bunches. And then I might be around for a while. But yeah, it is the circus, as one mentor told me.
Yeah, well, it's that concentration of time. Like, okay, like maybe I'm gone for, I don't know, 3 to 6 weeks at a time or something. That's just me assuming. But I'm curious, like, how does your parenting style maybe like adjust or pivot or even change during that time period?
Yeah, that's probably the most unique part about, I guess, my role as a parent is my work and the travel schedule. So, I mean, in many ways, my wife becomes a single mom during those intense shooting times because I'm working 14-hour days. Some people have compared it to like a military deployment or something. We're doing vastly different things. I'm not trying to compare myself to the great work that the military does.
Yeah.
But the amount of time away and then the intensity of the work and the focus it requires could be similar. So so it's definitely a big commitment, and thankfully that's where the partnership with my wife really kicks in big time. And, you know, she sees the good and the purpose of what I'm going to go do and then steps up. But yeah, so those are probably the things I've had to learn and deal with. And then I've also adjusted work and done different roles and in order to be around more, because I didn't want to be the dad to miss out on the football season or the school play or things like that. So there's a lot of great people in the entertainment industry that really work hard to be there for their kids, and they're flying back on the weekends from wherever they are to not miss out on those things. Some people have like set time frames, like I won't be apart with them, you know, apart from them for more than 3 weeks or 2 weeks, like, because there's a whole bunch of people that travel obviously to go make movies. And so I know of people, yeah, it's Friday night and we're done, and they jump on a plane maybe from Boston to LA and go back and see their family for 12 hours and hop on a plane again, you know. So they would do that just to get that connection time. But it's really, you know, with the FaceTimes and the WhatsApps and the things like that in the last 5 or 6 years that have, you know, become ubiquitous everywhere, that has really helped a lot, because you can much more easily video chat and feel more connected while you're at a distance. So those have helped a ton, rather than when they were first born, it was still in its infancy.
No, totally. Like, even, you know, growing up in the 90s, like, we had calling cards. We didn't have cell phones, like, to call Colombia. Like, that's where my dad lives, so we would call like in that way.
Right.
And I'm curious, have you seen any of that? Have you seen your kids affected by that? You know, it's not so much absence, but more like, you know, that time where you're not there physically. And again, maybe they're still pretty young, and then the last 5 years that has been happening. I'm curious, have you seen any kind of effects or anything from the distance, or have you seen, like, not really, if anything, just strengthen the relationship?
Yeah, I guess it's tough to know if it's been, I mean, there's always good and bad sides to everything, right? So but it's hard because I can't go and run the reverse scenario. I don't know how bad they're screwed up. But it honestly hasn't been, well, with COVID kind of shutting everything down, I've been really around a lot the last few years. And then as I am more into directing, it's really like an intense period once every 2 years. So it's really not, before, in my earlier days, I was doing some cinematography work where every time I was going to work, I was leaving. So I was traveling quite a bit more then. But thankfully, as the kids were born, I started to make that career shift. And part of the reason was to be able to be around more and to have more control over my schedule, and to be able to work from home more in the editing process and in the writing process. So, but I guess I don't see, I haven't seen huge negative effects, because I think I've worked hard not to be an absentee father during those times, and they're kind of mentally prepared for it as well. There is certainly a distance when you come back, and it takes a week or two for them to get used to having you around, it definitely, there is a re-entry process that's a little bit awkward, as they're just not used to having to deal with you. So
and I'm curious, because, like, at the same time, like, listen, Danielle connected us because she knows that you're a dad that she admires and that she'd love to hear more about. So with that, like, it sounds like, even to me, like, again, you tell me, during that time when you are there, it's like that bond, that relationship is getting so strengthened, so that, and maybe there's an understanding there, like, hey, like, dad's gonna be away a little bit for work, but I mean, he's still gonna connect in this way. It's just gonna be a little different for the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful in families to share your. I'm really big on purpose and, like, why we're doing it, and so I think if you can share, and obviously it's great when a husband and wife can unify around a purpose, and then they can, when things get hard, you can go back, well, okay, this is why we're doing it, right? And so I can go back to that shared purpose. But I think, we often try to share those purposes when you're leaving, so that they also are clued into why dad's gone for a while, and what impact he's trying to make on the world, what good he's trying to do, how he's trying to express his giftings and talents, and do things to contribute to the world. And then in a small way, they can take part in that, or they know what they're sacrificing for. And I think that's really helpful. And even with kids, I think it's a cool paradigm for them to see their parents doing. So, and I think what's cool now too is that, like, my daughter and son, they can participate in small ways now that they're older in the shoot, so they often come out for a portion of the time. And like in one of the last ones, my daughter got to help with the wardrobe department and be a little intern and just go around and do some grunt work, but she just loved it. So there are ways. I am fortunate to be able to incorporate them in small ways into my work and make it a special time for them. So
yeah, and it helps that like the stuff that you do is so cool. So it's like, yeah, like I want to see that. Like, oh yeah, my dad makes movies. I was like, what? Like no one knows that. And I think that, like, some of the key takeaways that I'm taking, just in case someone's listening to this on the road or something, like the big thing is, like, look, like we're doing the work that's helping, like, in between. We're all about purpose. It's almost like that's a family value. And I mean, I've noticed this in my own life with my wife, and it's like, when we're behind a purpose, when everyone knows what we're doing or why we're doing what we're doing, like it kind of like we want to be part of something greater than ourselves. And that's where this comes into play. It's like now we're doing this for dad's mission, now we're doing this for mom's mission,
right?
And it's just like everyone's on board, and something tells you when you come back home, like, it's like, okay, I'm here to support my wife. I'm here to support the family. I'm here to show up in that way.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great energy source when things get tough to draw on, right? It's it's like a person training for the Olympics, and they don't want to wake up and but they have the purpose of trying to get this gold medal, right? So you go out and do the extra sprints, or run the hills, or do the extra weightlifting, because you have that you don't necessarily want to do, or that you're not looking forward to, but you have a purpose behind it that helps you make it through the struggle, and then makes you stronger in the end.
And it's a teaching moment too. And it's like, hey, like, look, this is how a family supports vision. This is how a family supports each other. Like, here now, when it's your turn, when you have a purpose, when you have a vision for something greater that you need us, and we're here for you.
Yeah.
Just brings everyone closer.
And I think for kids to be able to think in that fashion, like my daughter just was in a play that was real intense for the whole family for the last week, and that was her purpose. That she's expressing these gifts and helping in this theater community to put on a play for the world to enjoy. And so we get behind her purpose in that, right?
That's outstanding, man. Thank you for illustrating that, because you're definitely the first guy who's kind of gone in that direction, at least on this podcast. And I'm curious for you, different question. If we were to go back in time and we could do it all over again, what would you do the same?
I thought you were going to ask the opposite.
Everyone thinks that. I always get them on their toes.
What I do the same. In regards to parenting, I guess, I've always loved dinner times and bedtimes, and making those a priority to try to be as present as possible. I think there's even psychological studies that show the importance of dinner time together. I don't know if you're familiar with that in your work.
And you mean dinner time without any TV, right? It's just you guys talking.
I probably the average American family just goes and grabs something and sits on the couch and watches it, TV or has a TV on in the kitchen. But yeah, I'm talking about, you're right, an intentional focused time with no distractions, where you're actually communicating with each other and checking in about whatever is going on in everyone's life.
Mm.
But yeah, but there was I forget who did the study, but I just remember hearing about it, years ago, where they were surveying all sorts of people who had done well in life, but it came from all these different kinds of backgrounds. And one of the few commonalities that they could find between them is that they all had dinner together with their families. And it could be a single mom and her son, or it could be a family of 6. It could be the inner city, it could be the country. It could be in a housing project or in a mansion. Like they couldn't. There was people from all different backgrounds, but that was one of the primary commonalities. So that has always stuck in my head. And so I think I would do that, and then certainly we, for better or for worse, and sometimes not good for our schedules, but we have these long extended bedtimes, typically that 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But those have been really sweet times, and where we just get to process the day and talk about life and talk about whatever's on their minds. And so I love those conversations, and some of them are funny and goofy, and some are very deep and philosophical, but it's a sweet time. So I would do those things again.
Nice, man. And I'm curious, how much do you feel that your parenting style is affected by the way that you were raised, the way that your parents raised you? How do you feel? What do you feel like that they did that you are like, what, I'm doing this with my kids, I'm doing this with my wife?
I think obviously most people are probably really impacted by their parents' parenting style, either in a reactionary or incorporative sense, right? But no, my parents were very loving and supportive, and so was fortunate, and they worked really hard at their parenting and put a lot of effort into it. So that was I was very fortunate in that regard. But they actually, I didn't know of the study at that time, but the dinner time was important, and they had this cool concept of, we want to have breakfast together if we can to launch people out into the day, and then we want to have dinner together to process the day as everyone returns back, and kind of the send off and then receive model. So that I really like in concept. And we do it in a little different way, sometimes with driving the kids to school is different, than breakfast, or we translate that. But so there's things like that, and just a high value on getting away together as a family that we've incorporated, and having adventures. And I think the focus on creating experiences rather than having stuff and material goods, I think that's something I've inherited from them as well.
Yeah, I think there's something in it's funny, there's a dad that I spoke to. He's like sometimes kids don't want, like, maybe they want the experience more than they want the thing. Like,
right.
Maybe we're just getting them gifts. It's like the 5 love languages. Have you checked that out?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, and it's like, all right, what's the love language my kid has? I made a post about it. By the time of this recording, it'd be a couple months. But like, with regards to the 5 love languages, like, which one, and this goes with anyone, like, what way do they receive and experience love? I think that is so cool, just the memories, instead of just physical things. I'm curious, on the flip side of that, what is it that you feel you're doing intentionally different than the way that you were raised?
I think I was raised in a bit more black and white, rules regimented style. Like, there was, this is what you need to do. And I feel like that broke down the relationship at times. And so I'm working hard to have like more open communication and not have, I don't want my kids to have subjects I feel like they can't talk to me about. So I'm just working on just a lot of acceptance in that. Because there were certain things that I would never talk to my parents about that.
Yeah.
And I'd love for that to be different. So yeah, so it's probably along the lines of just communications, and thankfully it helped me have some great, incredible friends that I would go to, but yeah, I just didn't feel that same sort of broad ability to talk to them about.
Yeah, I'm curious, what is your approach to that? Because there's I know, for a lot, there's a gentleman that I was coaching the other day, and he's like, with his yeah, there are things that like I want to repair my relationship with my dad, and a big reason is because there are things that I grew up with that I didn't feel comfortable going to my mom about.
Yeah.
And I felt kind of alone, and I couldn't talk to anyone about that. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, like that's just a comfortability, that's a trust thing. And the reason I bring that up is I'm curious, like, what are you doing to help create that trust, help create that environment where like we can talk
Yeah.
about anything that you want. There's nothing taboo.
Yeah. I think it starts with trying to hold back judgment on things, and showing a lot of curiosity as opposed to that judgment, or I'm labeling this as good or bad, or that behavior is good or bad, or this person or your experience. And so I think it's rooted in like a trust in your, like a lot of parents I see jumping in like to, oh, you can't do that because this is, you'll get hurt, or this will happen to you, or don't hang around that person because you'll, all these awful things will happen. So I think it's being a parent that's rooted not in fear, with whatever way you do that, whether it be by spirituality and your faith, or just logic, or what, find some way not to be as fearful. And from that, then I think you're more open, you're more curious, you're less judgmental, because you don't have to go save them from all these things. So that allows them, I think, then to have more freedom, like, oh, I can talk this because there's less judgment happening. And I think also just being, in addition to that, like bringing up topics first and not being afraid, and in some ways talking to your kids like you would with their friends. I mean, I don't agree with that your kids need to be your best friends or whatever. I mean, if that happens, awesome. But I think around some of the awkward, difficult topics is just kind of poking fun at it, and making no subject taboo within your family, because you've talked about it before.
And what I'm hearing is leaving a room of zero judgment there. And I think to me it's kind of like, oh wow, like yeah, like we can, like, yeah, we can judge our kids. And just making sure that's not at the table. Like even with coaching, one of the principles is we can't influence or help anyone if we are in a place of judgment, whether that's judging them or judging ourselves. And just creating that environment of zero judgment. Also, like, let's just talk. Let's not be afraid to talk about some of the hard, maybe uncomfortable, awkward things.
Right.
And not be afraid to kind of like, talk to them as if they're not our kids. To me, the way I would even see it is like almost like, yeah, like you're like, we're an equal here. Like I'm talking to another person. I'm not talking to my kid.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, think of a random hypothetical example. It doesn't happen to me personally, but like, let's say your kid comes home and it's like, they find a vaping jewel or something. Right. And so you want to, or they're saying, hey, some of my friends are vaping, or, and I'm kind of curious about it or whatever. So some parents would just freak out and say, well, don't hang around the kids and don't do that. Well, how are you ever doing that? If I catch you, doing that, you're going to do that. And, they're doing it, like you said before, out of a loving stance. Like they don't want their child to get addicted to the nicotine and to destroy their lungs with unknown chemicals, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a bad thing, but if you can step back from the fear and be more curious and engage, well, what makes you so curious about it, or what about these people, or and you can get into exploring, like, is she just trying to impress them, or is there something, you know what I mean? Like, you can more easily get to the root than just trying to extinguish the outer behavior that's happening, right? Because it could be all about conformity, or not feeling great about herself, right?
Yeah.
Or wanting to be accepted, and you're not getting to that root because you're just dealing with the symptom, right? We'll just make the symptom go away, and then the root will disappear, but that doesn't usually happen. So ultimately, I think, you want to be in this place of huge curiosity where you can walk through it with them, so that you can be the person and not their less wise 14-year-old friend that they'll go to instead of you. You want to stay in the ball game, right? To be able to communicate with them, and that's really the win, is that you're able to process through this with them, and they don't have to tackle it alone.
I love, and I'm curious, even vice versa. So like, we're not judging them. I'm curious because it's very easy. Like, look, I'm embarrassed to talk about this, or I'm afraid like a parent shouldn't be doing this, or a parent shouldn't do this, and now my kid is talking to me about it, or it's like there's a shame that we have of ourselves when it comes to it. I'm curious if there's been an instant like that for you, and then there's like what did you do to like, all right, like I am embarrassed to talk about this. I kind of don't want to admit that I've done this or do this, and like I want them to know, like at the end of the day, how can I help them, even though I'm feeling so. Like, has that ever been an experience that you've had?
I can't think of any. Right. I guess I'm not fully grasping the question, but maybe you could ask in a different way or something.
Or I guess like, let's say it's like, I don't know. Let's say there's, because on the flip side of that, there's like, well, on the judgment side is like, maybe it's like, hey, like my kid is talking to me about, asking questions about sex.
Yeah.
And asking about questions about condoms and stuff. I'm like, all right, well, me as a dad, like, let's say, and again, there's a hypothetical example, like, yeah, well, I don't want them to do that, but at the same time, I was doing that. And this, like, maybe something embarrassing happened, or maybe something I'm not proud of, like maybe, I don't know, we had to, got a disease or something, or
yeah. I think those cautionary tales are interesting. And if I guess our group of close friends, as we talk about that, we're always wondering, like, how much do we share about our own past that would make it seem permissible versus what's helpful, just to know that they were going through the same thing. So I think, you just have to use your wisdom and discretion about what is helpful there. But there's minefields either way. Like some people have been worried, like, oh man, I don't want to talk about that because it may normalize it or give a sense of permission. But I think, overall, like, I heard from some great mentors and friends a while ago, like, if you do have a stance of being able to share your failures and apologize, and you have a habit of that, then I think that opens up a lot of vulnerability as well. Like, they know that it goes both ways. It's not like my parent who thinks he's perfect that never apologizes for anything, or so I think that's a helpful thing as well, that also opens the door for this. They're like, oh yeah, well, they'll come to me and when they mess up, or I mean, that's a slightly different topic than what we're talking about in terms of bringing up awkward subjects. But for some reason, I was just reminded of the power of that when talking about those things. It kind of humanizes you a little bit, and gives them the model for coming to you with mistakes, because you've modeled it to them.
Yeah, and there's something that came up that's I'm very curious to see what your perspective is. Like, we live in a day and age where a lot of things are just normalized.
Mhm.
Like very particularly, I remember it was a few years ago actually. There's like Victoria's Secret has a store for preteens,
Mm.
and it's like, and just like seeing the clothes like on the window pane, and it's like it's almost like normalizing kind of like sex and sexualizing like introducing that to kids much earlier. And you see that with TV. You
Yeah,
see that
yeah.
like a lot of high school shows and stuff. Like it's a big thing, even drugs. I'm curious, what is your approach to, the like culture, society is normalizing these things, but at the same time it's like, all right, like I don't want my kid doing all this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want them to get addicted to porn or to go down some of those roads. You want to protect it. So I mean, we'll have to see. My son's still young. We don't know what will happen, but one thing we have done is as appropriate as we thought. Basically, we introduced it, these concepts and these ways of objectifying women and showing that it wasn't the ideal thing and the purpose behind it. People are trying to sell sex and create ads and entice people. Like we started to introduce those concepts at a fairly young age. So again, we're talking about it first and trying to normalize the conversation at a young age. I mean, not, I think there's an age where it's too young, where they're not even ready for those conversations. But
Yeah.
for the, for whenever you think it's appropriate, to not be afraid to delve into that. And you just start in really small bites, like, well, isn't that a funny picture? What's that girl up there in her bathing suit for?
Yeah.
Why do you think they do that? Just kind of, again, like having a conversation about it. And I wonder, does that girl like that, or um,
Yeah.
and she's up there in her PJs or whatever. You're trying to put it in their language. But I think that's just, as you start with those basic things, and then we've actually had some other books that warn people of harmful pictures and stuff, because that's such a huge deal on the internet, with these kids being able to be exposed to this whole world of harmful images. Um, just
Mhm.
to create a warning around it, and with the instructions, hey, come to us if this happens, and we'll help you with it. So I think too, that's part of the normalizing process, is starting the conversations.
Yeah, and
Probably far younger than we had them.
I think there's also like, again, the person listening to this podcast, um, they probably have a radically different walk of life. I know growing up in the town that I grew up in, you know, sex was to me it was shocking now to understand, but there were people having sex like in middle school, and it's just like certain things are normalized for different areas, like different parts of the world. So whatever is normalized in your area, like that's where it's like there's no cookie cutter approach to this stuff. It's like, okay, maybe I need to have a certain conversation with my kids now about it,
Mhm.
especially if your environment is surrounded by family members who do condone this stuff. Maybe there's a cousin out there
Right,
who's
right.
kind of like they're talking about, or maybe there's an aunt and uncle who are pretty open about this stuff. It's like it's kind of like what you said, like it's like just having that conversation when it's ready. And I think it's just those little things that help combat the normalization of these, or like help educate, is like dinner time, bedtime, like showing that we're present, being there. It's those family moments where it's like, okay, I'm providing an environment where they can trust and they can communicate, and I can also communicate some of the stuff that I want them to know, because at the end of the day it's like, we're the ones raising the kids. It's either us or it's going to be someone else, but they're going to be raised somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're gonna get, it's either you or somebody, and yeah, they'll have the conversations, or they'll process it with someone, whether they're friends or YouTube or a blog on the internet, or a post,
Yeah.
or or a mentor or something is ideal. So yeah, I think that's one of my wife and I's hope, is that we can be in having those conversations with them and help them process these things. Or like you're saying, it's a good question, like what sets you up to do that, and to create that environment. But yeah.
Dude, cool stuff. And I'm curious, for the dad who, travels for work, the dad who loves his kid, he's super present, but he's got to go. Maybe he's, scheduled like yours. Maybe he is in the military. Maybe he's, traveling salesman or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of like management consultants gone every week,
Yeah. What is some advice that you have for him?
Man, I guess I probably have more advice or thoughts about the marriage side than the kids, because the kids just, I think I can get pretty focused. So I think, and other dads are way better at this than I. Like, there's these regular check-ins, and when you're gone, I think is really helpful for the kids, and so they just you're staying updated on their lives. That's kind of pretty obvious. So I don't know that there's anything terribly unique about that. But going back to, because I think your partner or spouse is so important when you do those things, and when you take those trips, that again, I think if you can make the decision together to do it, to enter into this job, or to enter into the military, like if as much of as you can have a shared ownership of that role, again, going back to the purpose thing, I think that is probably one of the most revolutionary things that helps. Like if I go to my wife and say, hey, you can veto this job, I think I want to do it, but I'll do whatever you want to do. This has to be good for both of us. I think when you do that creates a good environment for things to succeed when you're gone, because it's not like, oh, he ran off and did what he wanted to do. When your spouse has a say in it, whether the husband or wife is a leaving and going, then it just helps to have that shared ownership. And I think that's been the most revolutionary thing with these long travel stints.
And what is a piece of advice that you have for the dad who, maybe him and his wife separated, or him and the child's mother aren't together, and maybe he lives in another state, maybe he lives in another city, or even a country? What is some advice that you have for him?
Wow, that's much more difficult and more complicated. And it's not as, just because I haven't experienced it, I don't know that I have a whole lot of advice. They may be better. I should be asking them advice for when I'm gone, because they're living it more. So yeah, I guess I don't feel qualified to really speak into that. But it all does, like, I don't know if you ever read like M. Scott Peck's The Road Less Traveled book from long ago, like kind of a classic psychology book. But I mean, that was really fascinating when I read it long ago, that like love is a choice, and it's an action, and it's a decision more than a feeling. And so with that, I think when you're gone, you just have to make that decision daily. Okay, what do I need to do to care about them? And, it may suck that I'm at a distance, but what can I do? What's in my control? And just to keep that focus, because I know everyone's a little bit different, but when I'm away, I can lose that focus. I can get drawn into the busyness of whatever I'm doing. So I think it's just having that discipline to take those little actions of love, that whatever that is for your child, that you're continually trying to do that, despite the distance.
I love that. And what is a piece of advice that you have for a new dad, or maybe a dad who's expecting?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I guess to just be as present as you can and enjoy every stage has such amazing things about it. So you're continually amazed by the new stage you're in, and perhaps missing some of the old. And so the number one thing you'll hear from most parents is how fast it goes. So just to enjoy and savor the different stages, because they happen pretty quickly, you know, when looking back on them, and they change pretty rapidly. So I would hate for fathers to just not be fully present in any of those stages, because each one of them is beautiful in its own way.
And this question isn't for me. This question isn't for any dads in particular. This is for your two kids. What is something that you want to tell each of them, whether you've told it to them already or you haven't told it to them yet?
I probably told them too much stuff already. They may be sick of hearing me, but I just want to set them up well to go use their talents in the world to bless other people and to make an impact in the world, however big or small that is, you know, for them to be able. So my hope for them is that I launch them well, and that I prepare them to go be their very best. But I think that, you know, so I just always tell them, you know, go do your best and be a good friend. So, so that's probably what I'd keep telling them, because I think, you know, if you keep striving to be the best you can be, good things will happen. And if you engage in relationships and are a good friend and are caring about your fellow human, you know, that will bring you lots of joy. So I think I'd just keep shouting that at him.
Brian, dude, thank you so much for being on here. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. There's so much that I've gotten taken away from, and dude, thank you, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's fun to talk about this. It's
You
great.
got it, man.
It's great that you're doing this and helping fathers, because it's one of the hardest things to do well in the world.
Hey, we all have a place. This is my purpose. So thank you for joining my team on this purpose and sharing your wisdom, man.
Yeah, well, it's a great one. So keep at it.
Thank you, man.
Awesome.